first off this afternoon, we're going to have Scott Charlton from Transurban. He's going to be speaking about transport networks of the future. Scott, an engineer by trade, joined Transurban as CEO in 2012. He has more than 25 years experience in the industry, and prior to that he was CFO at Leighton Holdings. So can you please welcome to the stage? Thank you.
Thanks everyone, and thanks for letting me the opportunity for me to speak. It's always good to speak at an infrastructure conference because you never get to say the word billions more than you do at an infrastructure conference. The only better place to speak at an infrastructure conference is in the US, and I get to use the word trillions when I speak about infrastructure there. But I think that's one of the problems, and I've talked about it in some of my other speeches, is that it doesn't resonate with the public. To talk about billions of dollars, it doesn't resonate to really talk about some of these huge congestion issues because it just is, they're too big, they're too complex. And so what I'm going to try and do, I'll get to the billions of dollars in my speech. What I'm going to try and do is personalize it and really talk about how the problems are going to affect all of us. So I'm going to start out with my daughter. So I have a daughter. Her name's Hannah. She's going to turn 19 soon. She's currently living here in Sydney and studying and working. She finished school last year, and like most 18-year-olds, she knows everything, and she tells me every day about all the mature decisions she makes and how old school I am. Now, she got her access to her first car about 6 months ago, and most of us remember what that was like. It was a big deal for me growing up in Texas to get a car because it's a long way to anywhere. But the key, freedom to go wherever you want to go, and particularly in some place like Australia where there's so much to see and do, so she's very excited. And obviously, I want the very best for Hannah. We all want the very best for our own children. We want what our parents gave us, but obviously even better, and I'm sure we'd all like to have a crystal ball to see what the future would be like. Obviously, that's not possible, but today we decided to share with you what we think everyday life is forecast to be like in Sydney in relation to transport in 20 years' time. Now, at Transurban, we have some of the most sophisticated network and transportation models in the globe. And what we've done is painted a snapshot of 2035, which includes all the current committed infrastructure projects that we've been talking about today and the ones that have been announced. Now, we've chosen Sydney because that's obviously where we are today, and that's where my daughter lives. But the video we're going to show you could apply to any of the capital cities that we've talked about in Australia. So let's fast forward and take a glimpse of Sydney in 2035.
And another thing to check down with your morning coffee. The annual City Livability Report card is out today. And where did we land? Down. Down again. Down like your property values, and I am sick of it. I love this city, but when you're stuck in traffic day after day, it's no wonder we're slipping down the ladder. Now, when I left home this morning, the roads were already close to cactus. And you think it's bad now? We're looking at another 1.5 million people living here in the next 15 years, and we don't have the money for the roads and trains we need now. This ship is sinking and no one's bailing. And this hasn't all just fallen out of a clear blue sky. Oh no. Plenty of cities overseas took action years ago. They came up with all sorts of ways to tackle their transport issues and how they fund roads, rail and so on. You know, I was in Singapore recently and they've got a system where drivers pay for what they use and public transport makes enough money to pay for itself. That sounds like common sense to me. It's working for them, worth a try for us.
Turn it off.
Tell me what you think.
Good morning, Hannah. I've switched off the radio alarm clock.
Right. When did Jack leave for work?
Your husband left the house at 4:55 a.m.
Okay, and how's my morning looking?
Today it's going to take you 118 minutes to drive to the office.
Typical. Almost 2 hours for a 40-minute drive. What are my options?
All bus services are delayed due to congestion. Train services are running over capacity. I estimate the first train with capacity stopping at your nearest station will be at 9:12 a.m. Car spaces at the station are now full. The nearest available space is 20 minutes walk from the station. Would you like to book it?
No. When's the latest I can drop the kids at Mum's?
You need to leave by 6:15 a.m. to drop the children at your mother's by 6:30 a.m.
Feel bad she has to drop them to school every morning. Show me my diary. Let's see if there's any wriggle room.
You have a busy day scheduled. Your first meeting is with the sales team at 8:30 a.m.
Can you move the meeting?
The sales team is unavailable to meet until next Monday. You will not be able to submit this week's report without meeting the sales team. Would you still like to reschedule the meeting?
No.
Message received.
Read message.
Ali Brooks has been delayed en route and will not make the 9 a.m. meeting. The next time you can meet is 5 p.m.
This meeting has to happen today. Book it in. Looks like I won't be home for dinner.
Normal levels of congestion are expected this evening. You will return home around 8 p.m. As you'll be away for almost 14 hours, I have booked a car recharge station at work.
Okay. Message Jack. By dinner, I'll be home late.
Message sent. Hannah, based on your schedule, you need to be out the door in 37 minutes.
Better get moving. Wake the kids up.
So, 20 years' time and it's a mess. And it looks like the city's grounding to a halt. So we've not left our children with a better city, but a more stressful and less livable one. And if I were Hannah, I would either look to work from home or a city where better quality of life is possible. So unless something changes and we start to get serious about how we are going to fund, manage, and operate our public and private infrastructure, this is our future and the future for our children. Now, we already have issues and we know the problems are building. When it comes to congestion levels, Sydney and Melbourne rank alongside London, LA, and New York, and these cities are 3 times our size. In 1 year alone, the average city motorist spends 89 hours, more than 2 working weeks, sitting in traffic. If nothing changes, by 2035, Sydney-siders will face congestion levels on par with Mexico City and will waste 110 hours a year in traffic. On some of the very worst routes, like the one that Hannah would have to take, motorists could be spending up to 2 hours for what is a 40-minute trip outside of peak hours. And this peak hour is spreading. The biggest percentage increases of traffic on Transurban's roads is at 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. as drivers try to avoid the traditional rush hours. In 20 years' time, our major capital cities will be home to 30% more people. Sydney and Melbourne's population will be edging up to 6.5 million. Right now, our population is increasing by 1 person every 80 seconds, so by the end of this speech, in just under 20 minutes, we will have added another 15 people. And more than 3/4 of Australians are living in cities, and that is increasing with 80% of all jobs being concentrated in the large cities. And I think some of this was talked about earlier, but hopefully to visualize this, more than half of the employment growth in our cities is occurring less than 10 kilometers from the city center, but more than half of all population growth is happening in suburbs more than 20 kilometers from the city center. So the roads and the public transport networks are straining, and with the daily commute already to reach the jobs. Now today, in the biggest cities, less than 10% of all jobs can be reached within a 45-minute drive for those people living in the outer suburbs. Productivity is down and costs are up as we pay the consequences for freight idling and traffic. Again, some of these numbers talked about earlier. Road congestion is estimated to cost $15 billion a year. I told you I'd get the billions in. And latest projection put the cost to the economy of living standards at $53 billion by 2031, which IA published. And for governments, the budget allocation will become even more difficult with expenditure on aged and health services expected to double due to our growing and our aging population. And the revenue we once relied on from fuel excise as the major funding source for transport infrastructure will continue to decline ever faster as more fuel-efficient and electrical vehicles hit the road. Every time we replace a 20-year-old sedan with a late model car, we lose approximately $350 of fuel excise per annum. Replace it with an electric car, and there is no return for infrastructure. Now, this is all great for the environment, but it's disastrous for our funding model. The infrastructure backlog already estimated at $700 billion, and in 2013 alone, we faced an almost $7 billion shortfall in income on transport infrastructure. And this gap will continue to widen as our main funding source is depleted. And when it comes to public transport, today's daily crush may seem almost comfortable. I think some of these numbers we talked about earlier. Passengers are forecast to almost double in the next 20 years, where we're already heavily subsidizing our networks and recovering just 20 to 30% of operating cost. The world's best mass transit systems have efficient operations and fare structures that recover 75% or more of their operating costs. Our current transport funding model is a product of last century. Not only is it past its use-by date, it is not transparent and it is inherently unfair. because the driver of a late model fuel-efficient car is paying far less in fuel excise than a driver of a less efficient older model, despite them having the exact same impact on congestion and on infrastructure. Because it's the motorists who cannot afford to buy the latest model cars that pay the most. And rural and regional drivers also pay large amounts in fuel excise, but their cost to the network in the form of congestion or road damage is minimal. This funding model does not work now, and if nothing changes by 2035, we'll all be living in Hannah's world. But, so not to depress everyone, there are some positives out there. In 20 years' time, we'll have access to technology that has the potential to fundamentally change the way we move around our cities. Now, much of the technology that we're seeing or hearing about today will be mainstream. The automotive industry is confident that we're just 5 to 10 years away from driverless vehicles being on the market with mass adoption by 2040. In April this year, a driverless car completed a 9-day trip across the United States. It drove across 15 states from San Francisco to New York, collecting and storing 3 terabytes of data along the way. That is equivalent to 30% of all the printed material in the U.S. Library of Congress stored in a single car. By 2035, every vehicle will be internet connected, with the potential to collect, share, and act on enormous amounts of data. Your car will be able to communicate with cars around it, which means better traffic flow, fewer accidents. It will be able to receive information from roadside systems and real-time traffic conditions, and at the same time, obviously, give out data about its speed and lane movement. Technology companies have shown that they can combine big data processing with big data analytics, so vehicles will effectively see the road, and they will be able to learn things like humans. In essence, your car will develop artificial intelligence. This means we'll be able to better integrate communications, control information processing across all aspects of the transportation systems, with public transport to roads, and provide real-time service information back to the public. And this will bring with it a wealth of opportunities. But technology alone will only get us so far. When Infrastructure Australia released its audit report last month, there was an immediate call, and everyone's first thing to do, particularly the bankers, build more infrastructure. But new roads and public transport system alone will not solve our issues. We simply cannot keep building our way out of congestion, and we have to change the attitude that infrastructure is free once it's built. In reality, most of the infrastructure we have today has been paid for and funded by our parents, but it is expensive to run, it is in need of urgent repair, and obviously it needs extensive expansion for future growth. But only major policy reform will allow us to create efficient, flexible, and integrated transport networks that will meet the needs of our growing cities. And this means moving beyond the antiquated funding model that I talked about to a sustainable funding system that is built on a principle who those who benefit will pay, but at the same time ensures equity and fairness. User-pays pricing models have been pursued extensively in most all infrastructure and utility markets. Why are roads and transport different? We need a system that reflects the actual cost of using infrastructure, be it roads or public transport, and uses pricing signals to encourage more efficient use. If we can make better use of the existing infrastructure, we can not only spread the load, but delay the need and the size of future investment. Now, reform, which is somewhat of a dirty word these days, of this kind of magnitude will not happen overnight, and a backlash is inevitable if the community does not understand the motive for the change. But I'm optimistic that we can achieve support if we show Australians what is to gain from a fair and sustainable transport funding model. And this is all about making a decision on the quality of life that we want as Australians. Now, we commissioned independent research last year which showed that twice as many respondents favored a user-pay system for the funding of road infrastructure rather than a flat fee type arrangement. So obviously people believe the user pays can be fair. However, if we're to progress this reform, there are a number of critical components that we'll need to do. First, we'll have to upgrade our existing infrastructure to ensure our road and public transport systems can be integrated. We need a user pay system that spans across all modes of transport and encourage more efficient use, such things as carpooling. We need to look at things like staggered work times for employers. And we need to ensure the system is fair and equitable and does not, again, penalize those who can least afford it. We also need an appropriate operating model that we believe sees the government as the regulator and policy setter and the private sector as the operator and the owner. This is the structure of almost every other utility. Now, no doubt, to progress such sweeping reforms, governments will need support, and they have it from numerous industry experts, and some have already spoken today, and government-endorsed reviews. But the time again has come to move beyond just all the discussion and the theory, and we need to start taking action if we're to protect the livability of our cities. Earlier this year, we announced that we'd be conducting this road network pricing study. We would trial various types of user pricing and gauge Australians' views. And we see this as a first practical step to getting real data about drivers' preferences, their behavioral choices, and what they think is a fair system, as well as their attitudes to using networks more efficiently. Because this is the problem here, because it doesn't matter how good the science is. We've got some great models that'll tell you what the outcomes will be. But if the Australian community does not accept the case for reform, it will not happen with our current political system. We will trial 3 user-paid model in our study. These include distance per kilometre charge, a one-off charge based on anticipated kilometres, and a price per trip or an access charge. We'll also test other components such as time of day and accordant charge for entering the CBD. Participants will receive a device in their car so we can monitor their normal driving patterns and their driving patterns under an elected model. They will be incentivized according to their behaviour, so it will reflect real-life situations. And we're looking to commence with a sample group of about 100 drivers for a month-long pilot program in the next couple of months. We'll then assess the process and the findings with an expectation to getting the major study underway by the end of the year. And the study will cover the greater Melbourne metropolitan network and involve approximately 1,200 drivers who have volunteered to participate. Again, the study will give us what no amount of theory or surveys will do, and that is tangible data on how drivers behave and feel when faced with different road pricing systems. We hope it will provide a valuable contribution to progressing overall transport reform. So with all these advances we will shortly have with technology to maximise our infrastructure, what we really need now is policy reform. If we can bring these things together, our cities will be much better places in 2035. So let's take a look at what life could be like if we implemented the reforms and applied the technology that encouraged the best use of our transport networks and provided sustainable funding for new infrastructure. This is our preferred version of 2035.
And the annual livability scorecard is out, and it looks like we're still on top. Surprise, surprise. But let's not get complacent here. They're saying another 1.5 million more people will be living here in the next 15 years. And quite clearly, a few things need to be addressed before that happens. For one thing, who's doing anything about safety on the roads? Yesterday, I was nearly sideswiped by some numbskull in a manually driven car. Lucky for me, my car saw it coming and the only damage was to my nerves. But how long until we get these death traps off the roads? If you know someone without a driverless car, talk some sense into them. If you're still convinced you can do the job better, oh man, you need to wake up. So tell me what you think. How do we get everyone into driverless cars?
Spare me.
Sparing you.
What does my run into work look like this morning?
Good morning, Hannah. There is currently a traffic incident and routine maintenance works on your direct route. However, traffic is flowing within normal parameters. No delays anticipated.
Show me.
Flexible work protocols for participating employers are in place this morning for non-essential employees. No delays to peak hour traffic are anticipated.
Estimated run to work?
If you leave at 7:30 a.m. and drop the children at school at 7:45 a.m, your estimated travel time to work is 40 minutes.
And show me the cost comparison if I leave before peak hour.
Here's the cost comparison breakdown.
I'll do that tomorrow. Schedule me to go in early, leave early, and do my last meeting from home by video conference.
Your diary has been updated.
Now, what are my public transport options today?
There are 3 train stations located along your route with all-day parking.
Will parking be available?
Here are the parking spaces available at each of the stations on your route. Would you like to reserve a space? Alternatively, the local bus service has a pickup point 200 metres from here and will take 9 minutes to the nearest station and 50 minutes to your usual stop in the city.
What about carpooling options?
Here are some people from your neighbourhood who are available to carpool into the city. I'll show you a breakdown of your transport options.
I think I'll drive today.
Your car is fully charged and will not require recharging through the day.
Great. How's my schedule looking?
You have a busy schedule today. Your first meeting is with the sales team at 8:30 a.m. Your last meeting ends at 5:30 p.m, so you should be home at approximately 6:15 p.m.
There's plenty of time to cook up something nice then. Send a message to Jack. Remind him to pick up some fresh veggies and basil.
Message sent.
Okay. Give it another 10 minutes, then wake the kids for school.
So clearly the world's an easier place for Hannah now that she has flexibility and options about how she's going to go about her day. And this is a Sydney that I'd want my daughter to live in, and I'd want her to know that I did everything possible to give her a better quality of life. Thank you.